I remember the period around awakening. It was a very intense period of intense spiritual seeking and being obsessed with watching non duality videos, and I couldn't get enough of them. I was going to work, and then as soon as came home, I would just watch non duality videos more obsessively than before. There was a momentum seemingly that was growing. And this is 2010, by the way, so a long time ago. And because I think there was this sort of intensity in the attention I was putting on the seeking, I remember having a real, I'm not going to call it awakening because that's not my understanding of awakening. It was just an incredibly spiritual experience. That's what I had. Like a few weeks before the awakening, I was sitting outside on the steps of my office in London, and it was my lunch break. So I was eating on the steps, and I had a client arriving an hour later. And in one moment, there was this incredible expansion of beauty and of, it was like my heart went and the trees in front of me, everything I had in front of me became suddenly more divine and beautiful. And I use the word divine because I'm not somebody who was ever religious or anything like that, but there was this palpable sense of God, not God in terms of someone, but there was this palpable sense of that being that which was orchestrating everything. That was the feeling in that moment. But it was extremely intense, and I started crying. And I remember I called somebody who at the time, he wasn't a non-duality teacher, but he was sort of somebody I used to go and speak with about stuff. And I remember calling him and crying and saying, it's all God, it's all God. And it was just very intense. Meanwhile, the session with the client was nearing its arrival, and I remember I had to quickly shut it down, so to speak, and, put the makeup back on and just, return to some kind of normalcy where I was the holder of space, and not, although I needed holding in that moment. And I also remember the client going, is everything okay? And I said, yes, everything is absolutely fine. How are you? Trying to redirect the attention on the client. And so that was what I call a spiritual experience. There's another word for it, but I can't think of it right now. But because I was very much listening to non-duality teachers and was starting to really grasp what that kind of awakening is, what a non-dual awakening seems to be about, not for one moment did I think that experience was that. Okay, so I knew it was a spiritual, mystical, that's the word I was looking for. It was like a mystical experience, okay? But not for a moment did I think this is non-duality. Not for one moment. And so in the same way how it arrived, it ended. And I didn't make a big fuss, so to speak, around that, because I knew that as beautiful as it wasn't what I was really looking for, what was really being looked for. And that arrived a few weeks later. And briefly, the difference between that mystical experience and the realization on that Sunday morning in my flat in London just really comes down, I think, to one thing. And it is the fact that what was seen, what was realized on that very ordinary Sunday morning, without the fireworks that had happened in that spiritual mystical experience, was that that which is always here is what I am, is what my nature really, really is. And that cannot ever come and go. That was the realization in that moment. And while the mystical experience arrived, amazing, gone. Okay? So when it is seen that what you are is immovable, so to speak, like not an experience, not something that comes and goes, but much less sexy than that, so to speak, and yet so much more final in some ways, because anything that appears is not that. And yet later it was seen that it is inseparable from it. But your actual nature is not an experience. And that was seen a few weeks later, and that's 16 years ago now. And since then, the deepening of that realization seemingly continued to happen. And I love to speak about what happens afterwards, as well as that very moment. But today I just wanted to flag up the difference between a spiritual experience and a recognition of your true nature.